Okay, I have to start with the mom moment. That music was a Langston-Wooten creative, original. My son makes beats. And quickly, because it dives right into this, Langston started making beats because he happened to be he's always made beats, but he makes beats for the boxing industry. So when the boxers come in, you hear his music. And there's always a little tag that says Langston produced it, and that's when I burst into tears. But he started it because a boxer needed non-copyrighted music to walk into. So I figured I'd start with that. All of us have these beautiful songs we play when we host these conferences. Now, I know Michelle didn't do that, but a lot of people play music that they shouldn't be playing unless they have a membership to at least two of these organizations. ASCAP, which is the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers, a broadcast music industry. It's not an expensive membership to have, and it's much less expensive than what you'll pay if you get caught using this music you shouldn't be using. All right, hi, I'm Kawania. And I'm gonna talk to you today about what to do when stuff hits the fan. If I go too fast, understand that's New Jersey, just tell me to slow down. All right, so the title here says what to do when stuff hits the fan. But I'm actually gonna talk to you about what to do before the stuff hits the fan. We wanna be prepared, all right? And it's really weird because you're probably up here thinking, why on earth is this woman up here talking to us? She's not an attorney. She's not a healthcare professional. But this is the first 20 years of my career right here. And I'm gonna hit what happened and what was a quick lesson. So it's really weird to me to be standing here in San Francisco area because I graduated from college in '88. My first job was working for a nonprofit, and we had a conference that took place in October of 1989. Anybody from San Francisco area knows what I'm talking about right now. So on October 17th, 1989, here I was, 22 years old, my first gig. That morning, I felt a little tickle in my throat. I thought it was allergies, no big deal. I spent the better part of that day helping conference volunteers stuff registration bags. Now, me thinking I'm being smart, put my bag underneath the table. Everybody else's bags were everywhere. My bag ended up in the men's bathroom at the Nico Hotel, and the men's bathroom in a trash can at the Nico Hotel next door. I don't even think the Nico Hotel is still in existence, but I will never forget that hotel's name. At 5:04 p.m., the largest earthquake hit San Francisco since 1906. I believe it was 5.6 on the Richter scale. There was a World Series taking place that day, and there was a benefit to that. Because of the World Series, most people were home from work, because this happened to be a special World Series. The Oakland A's were playing the San Francisco Giants. So everybody was at home, which was a blessing because that meant there were a lot fewer casualties that day. That's a sidebar. What did I learn from that day at 22? Well, number one, communication strategy. Because guess what? That was the stone ages of event planning right there. There was no web. There was no cell phones. There was no social media for me to mark myself safe on Facebook. There was not even 24-hour news at that point. I know how old I sound saying all of that. But understand, we figured out how to communicate with each other that day, and we communicated with 3,500 attendees that day. Which is funny, because back then, if you shook a copy machine too much, it stopped working. So we had to find a mimeograph machine and crank copies out, which made them carbon copies, which is what we now call CC. I know I sound old, but I had to tell that part of the story. But one of the biggest things I learned that day was how to get the message out to people, and I'll talk about that later. Oh, by the way, the tickle in my throat that morning was strep throat. Yeah, 1989. So I'm gonna fast forward 6 years. Now I'm 29 years old, and I am the head of a conference department. And my first big conference was in Toronto, and I was so proud. But what I didn't realize is that my conference was taking place at the same place as the NBA draft. And the hotel overbooked severely. So my VIPs got bumped to another hotel. Not just any old hotel, to like Motel 6s and whatnot. They even put some of our VIPs on cots in ballrooms. Yeah, now I probably would have gotten fired that day, but guess what? The night before the keynote took place, my keynote speaker dropped dead from a heart attack. Right? And let me tell you, that was the day I discovered the value of an emergency contact form. So now whenever I book speakers, whenever I work on a wedding, any vendor that has worked with me knows that right before the wedding, I want to know whom should I call if something should happen to you. And do you have a second shooter? Because I want their information too. God bless you. And the same goes for our wedding party. I want to know whom should I call. What are your dietary restrictions? Do you wear a medical alert bracelet? Because I don't want to spend valuable time trying to figure out what was wrong with you. Let me know in advance so I can let the EMTs know. All right? Now, speaking of EMTs, I also want to know, are there any EMTs in the building, or is that something we should look into? Where's the closest hospital? Where's the closest urgent care? This is information I gather way before a wedding will ever occur. Now, I bet you photographers are like, why do I care about this? Because you spend time away with our couple, off at engagement shoots, off on those cool locations when you take photos with them. Guess what? Before you leave, I give you a little laminated card that says, here's their information, here's my cell and my team cell, just in case something happens. Now, knock on wood, we haven't gotten past 2010, but I hope I don't have to give any new stories after that. 2001, I promise you I'm not going to trigger anybody in this room, but yes, 6 years later, I found myself in Manhattan planning an 1,100-person dinner for media moguls and celebrities and Wall Street finance people. It was scheduled to take place on September 12th. Yeah, that one was a crazy one, only because now, the two previous ones, I wasn't married. Now I had a kid. My attention was someplace else. And I had to focus on this because one of our chair of the boards, who was president of Comcast at the time, is now the president of NBC Universal, had breakfast that morning at the top of one of the towers with venture capitalists. And I needed to figure out where he was. And this is what worked for us that day. Again, we already had the communication strategy in place, because I'm still using that. We already have emergency contacts. Doesn't work when the towers went down, though. But we had Blackberries, and guess what? Blackberries weren't cell phones yet. They were analog, and that's how we were able to communicate with each other that day. And I have learned, that's where I learned the value of not just emergency contact information, but is there anybody else I should know for a VIP? Do you have a publicist? Do you have an executive assistant? Somebody else I should keep in my information. And I was able to email their secretaries that day, who were back in their offices safe and sound, and they could let me know that they were safe. The other thing I learned that day is the value of knowing an escape plan. So I was in a hotel, it was called the Regal Royale. I don't even know if it's there anymore. But the Regal Royale used to have a Hertz desk off to the side. I don't know why, but I happened to pass that Hertz desk and I was like, you have any cars? Why, yes, because this is before we were all thinking, I got to get out of New York. Could you hold one for me? Here's my credit card. And that's how I got out of New York later. So I'm going to fast forward to DMV 2002, just 1 year later. I had a series of events scheduled to take place in October of 2002. Every single one of them had to get canceled because, it's not like we didn't have enough going on, but we had two young men who decided they wanted to shoot people from a distance, the DC snipers. And yeah, that one always triggers me. And I will tell you why. I was fine in 89 and 95 and 2001. 2002 was a lot. And as Brian mentioned earlier this week, that was the one where I realized I needed therapy because I was a wreck after that. I'm going to fast forward to something that's not as heavy. New Orleans. We're going to skip New Orleans. We can talk about that over drinks. 2004, Houston had a series of events scheduled to take place after the Super Bowl. And it was all VIP events, so these were all the heads of major networks. But at the 2004 Super Bowl, we learned 2 words: wardrobe malfunction. And all of my VIPs that were supposed to be at that event had to go to the FCC that week and testify because they got in a lot of trouble, especially the head of CBS that year. So all of my events got canceled. Now, let me go back to contracts. 1989 was taken care of. Nobody was going to call you on that. I actually held the meeting that week. We stayed. They couldn't leave. Toronto, one of the clauses that came into play is a walk clause. I don't know if I mentioned that already. Did I mention a walk clause? A walk clause is, and work with your, don't use me, use an attorney, but a walk clause is a clause you will have in your housing contract that prevents the hotel from just sending your people out on their own. They start with transient people, transient travelers, other groups, and if they are going to walk any of your people, you need to approve them first. And if you approve them, make sure that they write a letter that says that shit wasn't your fault, right? And then make sure that they're at a comparable hotel, not a Motel 6, and make sure they pay for it, and make sure they give them transportation and sends them a nice amenity. All of the niceties to make sure you don't go down for their mistake. After Toronto, Manhattan, of course, fell under force majeure, under acts of terrorism, and so did the DC snipers. When my events were canceled, it falls in your contract under acts of terrorism. For New Orleans, keep going back to it. For Houston, that fell under act of government because the FCC were the ones who made us cancel our event. 2006, Washington, D.C. was my very first wedding. And I'm not gonna lie, I was like, are you kidding me? The groom's father passed away the morning of the wedding. I know, and this is about the time where Brian Green says to me he's not coming to any more of my events because people always die. I believe that's what he told me the last time. And that event, we did not cancel. The couple decided not to cancel it. But what we were able to use is a phone tree. I was able to talk to every vendor partner and make sure they understood what our game plan was going forward. And I'm just glad I had it because that would have been a very different vibe if we couldn't sit down and come up with a strategy on how we were going to take care of this couple without overwhelming them that day. And so we did. And then last one, 2010, again, it seems like when I have a bunch of events taking place, but anybody in the DMV knows about this. It was February, and I had a series of legislative events scheduled to take place. And all of us in the DMV are already weather wimps. But that year, we got hit by twin blizzards. We called it Snowmageddon. And we were out of commission for weeks because of that. And that falls under, as far as your contracts, acts of God. But let me tell you another clause that worked to my advantage then, and it most definitely worked to my advantage when COVID hit. I had a rebooking clause in all of my contracts. Our rebooking clause is very specific. You can only take 50% of your money to the new meeting. And the new meeting is going to be whatever our current fees are at that time. And you can only rebook if it falls under the clauses we say it falls under. Force majeure, anything along that line. It's not change of heart or anything like that. Okay? So that was my first 20 years in the event industry. So here are the quick lessons I've learned. You got to have solid contracts. Nothing blows me away more than when people are asking people for contract clauses on social media. I don't get it. And I don't get templates either. I'd rather you reach out to the lawyer and say, okay, I love your template, but here are all the things that I deal with in my business, and I need clauses to address all of them. You should not be pulling this together just by, piecemealing your contract. You should have an emergency plan in place in advance. And an emergency plan, I'm going to come to that, but it's not a long, extensive plan. It's more of, what's my game plan if something should happen? And this is for any vendor. This is not just planners. I'm talking, what is a florist emergency plan if something should happen? What if your truck breaks down? What's the plan in advance? You should know, right? Know your crisis management team beforehand. So most venues where we book has a crisis management plan already in place. And it's usually the security team that's in charge of it. They don't tell you about it because most of their crisis management plans are centered around active shooters. So it's not anything they want you to know. But you could at least sit down with them during one of your pre-planning meetings or during your final walkthrough and share yours and make sure that you're in sync with them. And speaking of the final walkthrough, a lot of people will have final walkthrough. They take the florist, they take the production company, maybe the photographer. If you are taking all of these people, this is the time to talk about what should we do if A, B, and C should occur. It shouldn't just be about logistics and design. This is a time, and include the security team in this discussion, because they're the ones who are going to tell you whom you should call for what. Who holds the defibrillator? I just need to know that. I don't know how to use one. I don't even really know what it is, but I know I need one. Who should I call if somebody needs CPR? If you're in a hotel, it's definitely the security department. But those are things you should know in advance. You don't want to waste. The key in being on point in terms of a crisis is not panicking. And not panicking means you need to have their steps in place in advance. Okay? Who is going to be at your wedding beforehand? In DC, we don't have big celebrities, but we have political celebrities sometimes. And you want to know who is going to be there so that, do I need to know about extra security coming with you? Because we should plan for that. Or is there something that we should know about entrances, exits, photography? What can we photograph in advance? All of that should be discussed in advance. I always ask my couple, is there anyone I should know about that's coming to your wedding? And bottom line, protect your stuff. Make sure that you have the right insurance. I learned it the first day when I lost my purse, but every single event I've been through, it would always be that we've left things behind in a huff. So you want to make sure you're mindful, not only of where everything is supposed to be, but how you're protecting it. I will tell you a quick story, and it gets to a case study. Event planners more than likely don't have enough insurance to protect their stuff. We have that general liability insurance. We may have insurance to protect our belongings in our office, but we take some of our belongings with us to a wedding site. So we should have insurance that's similar to what a general contractor would have. So it's worth talking to an insurance advisor. The same for photographers and videographers and anybody else. But I think a lot of event planners tend not to think, oh, if I take all of my chargers that I let my couple use with me, they'll be protected by my insurance. And I'm telling you, I know that's not true. So I hear people use the word risk, emergency, crisis, and disaster interchangeably. So I want to hit those really quick because I'm a teacher. A risk is a situation that involves exposure to danger. And you have 4 options here. You can accept it. So I always like to use the example of a divot. If you're having a ceremony outside and there are divots on the ground, and you look at it and you're like, well, we can accept this, and we just tell people that there are divots and be careful. Or you can mitigate it by, you can fill it in with some dirt, or have the landscaping crew help you out, or transfer it and let them do it. Or my favorite is just take a couple of chairs and move the aisle over. But whatever it, and that's avoiding it, but whatever it is, you need to consider all the risk in advance. And that's the beauty of walkthroughs. We have checklists, and I believe I have those available for you all. One is for safety. It is a safe, when you go to a venue, a safety checklist. Another one is for accessibility, because it's a different level of safety. And you want to make sure that when you're on site, that everything is where it needs to be. Why? Because we have something that is called duty of care. We are responsible for the safety of our attendees, of our guests, of the people we're taking care of, but I'm getting ahead of myself. This goes back to your risk management plan. An emergency is like an unexpected occurrence. And this requires immediate action, a power outage. Power outage seems like, oh, that's not an emergency. I had a wedding one year where there was a car accident in front of the hotel, and they hit the pole. And then when they hit the pole, they sent a power surge through the hotel, and it was right when the sound guy was testing the equipment for the band. So needless to say, we had no music for hours. We had no power, but I was more concerned about the band. And so that became an emergency. We had to figure out a game plan of, do they have backup equipment? Is there someplace we can go? What can we do to make up for the fact that the band won't be able to perform? And what is the role of the security personnel? Again, these are conversations you're going to have in advance. When there's an emergency, you always want that contact list I told you. We collect our information via Google form. We send it out, we send out the link, and I've only had one or two vendors that are like, I don't know if I want you to have all my private information. And I always say, fine, I'll leave your ass on the floor if something happens to you. But understand, this is for your help. You know, if you want to worry about conspiracy theories, go right ahead. Crisis. This is when things get a little scary. Now, I'm going to go back here. When do crises affect? When Michelle was talking about the recession, that falls under crisis sometimes. So how do I address it? But back in the day, we had things like dot-com burst, where everything went nuts because everybody got rich and everybody got poor really fast. Real estate crisis happened. All of these things, rumors. And that's your reputation, and I'm going to come to that later. And then disasters, the big things that I've managed to share with you. Let me share this, though. I shared all these big disasters. I do consider myself unique in that situation. I don't think a lot of people will ever go through what I went through. What will take you down is the goofy stuff. It's the small, goofy things that can get you in trouble. I hope none of you, I mean, we've all been through bullet 4, but I hope none of you have to go through any of the other things. But being proactive is key in all of this. Who and what do we need to protect? People, first and foremost. Part of our emergency plan includes details like, where is parking? Is it safe? And do we need a buddy system that day? It seems small, but the last thing I want to do is have someone hurt because we didn't take that into account. We have whistles. Everybody has a whistle. We have flashlights, whistles and flashlights, because we want people to have some sense of safety when they're walking to their car or when they're walking to another part of the venue. When our wedding guests, when we share information, we create a document called a guest information guide. We call it that because it's basically an emergency document, but we want it to be friendly. We don't want people to be nervous. The guest information guide tells you where shopping is, where the closest metro, but it also says where the closest hospital is, where the closest CVS is, what number to call in non-emergency situations, and what number to call inside the venue in emergency situations. And we encourage our couples to put them in their welcome bags. We put all this information on their wedding website. And believe me, I've had couples say, don't you think this is a lot? Sure, it's a lot. but better to be prepared and have a lot than to have somebody come up and say, you didn't tell me, and I'm going to sue you. Property. Well, this is where I was talking about earlier. You want to make sure your information is secured and insured, but also you want to make sure that everything is properly taped down. I know this is a obvious answer for the musicians and photographers and everybody, but it's something that we should all take into account when we're plugging things in and putting cords out. I happen to see that, have anybody seen that TikTok video where everybody's serving food and then one guy trips over the box? Just this past Saturday, I had a wedding and we had the boxes of flip-flops. And I had them on the wall. And the banquet staff says, nobody's gonna see them. And she puts it on the dance floor. And I'm like, what is that lady thinking? And I pull it off and she's like, nobody's gonna fall. Let me show you this TikTok video. But the thing is, constantly thinking of what could go wrong, that, nobody's gonna be paying attention to that, and that could have turned into some type of disaster. I'm being dramatic, but you know what I mean. Information. So yesterday, Elizabeth shared with Rock Paper Coin about a software that backs up your system. In 2018, I got hacked. It was the minute I clicked on the button, I was like, man, I made a mistake. And it hit my computer. And the minute it got through my computer, it got to my website. Google took me down almost instantly. And I was without a website from April until August. I lost all my good SEO. And in the process, it cost me 10 grand to get that back on track. And the only thing that helped me keep my data was that I used a software called Carbonite, because they had to wipe my computer clean. Clean, and I couldn't use a backup. But Carbonite backs up my computer from some remote location. And so I was able to get my data back that way. Otherwise, that would have been a much worse disaster than, so I highly recommend whatever software she mentioned yesterday. I believe Carbonite is specifically for Macs. And don't believe that crap that Macs don't get hacked, because I'm here to, Okay, good. But I'm here to tell you, Macs get hacked too. Especially if you're goofy people like me that click on things they shouldn't have, which I swore I wouldn't be that person. Your money. And one of the things I had to do when I got hacked was paid for, because I didn't, beat me later, I didn't have password protected on the files that contain my team's 1099s and W-2s. So now I got to pay for credit monitoring for the next year. But it also affected how, where my money was going that year. Image and reputation I'm going to come to really quick. So what is emergency preparedness? These are steps that we take to keep you, your company, and your guests, I'm going to call them stakeholders. I know that sounds corporate, but when I say stakeholders, I mean wedding guests, your client, the vendor partner, safe before, during, and after the event occurs. It is a set of rules or a plan that you've put in place to make sure that you do the best you can to keep everybody safe. Now, it sounds like, oh, but that's the planner's job. Again, I go back to saying all of you should have an emergency preparedness plan in place. It doesn't have to be super long. It's like a business plan. It doesn't have to be super long. You just want to make sure you cover your bases. And why is it important? Because we have this thing called duty of care. And that is a legal and moral duty that events are made as safe as possible for everyone involved. So, when the guest gets overserved, that's hard. It's not 100% our responsibility, but it can fall on us. So we have to know what steps we've taken to make sure that this doesn't occur. Something as simple as that. When we book cars for our couples, I want to see a maintenance record. And believe me, I get the eye rolls. I don't care. I want to see a maintenance record. I want to make sure that the car has gone through inspections, whatever it needs to do, Because if you ever found yourself in a situation where they asked you what happened, did you check? You want to be able to say, yes, I checked. And I don't know if you guys remember that story. I can't remember where it was, where the whole wedding party died. Remember, in a car, and then they found out the limousine company was being run out of a hotel, and none of the cars were up to code, and none of the drivers had the proper licenses. It freaks a person out thinking, I was supposed to check that too? Yes, that's information we need to know. So number one, we want to have a solid team. Here's some recommendations. This is your internal team needs to be solid. Your vendor partners need to be solid. So we got to all work together on this, right? And then the venue, you need to know what the venue can do, because this is all one big solid team that happens here. So you guys remember this? Remember? So this is a part of a solid team. But this is also where your reputation can come into play. So the young lady on the left, her name is Justina Miles. She just became very notable because she was the ASL interpreter for the Super Bowl. I feel a little bit of pride there because she is a student at Bowie State University, which is right up the street from my house. We're all very proud of her. ASL, the sign language interpreter on the right was from Nelson Mandela's wedding. Anybody know that story? He was a fake. He was a fake, and they didn't know it. You know why? Because one of the worst mistakes an event professional can make when it comes to emergency preparedness is an assumption. They assumed he was certified. Nobody did what they needed to do. I'm a child of a hard of hearing mother, and I wouldn't be able to tell if somebody was skilled as an ASL interpreter. That should have been, somebody should have done their homework. You're going to check if they're certified or they're licensed. Do they have references? What are their testimonials? Where have they worked before? How do you get up on the stage for Nelson Mandela's funeral, and it takes people on Twitter, the deaf community on Twitter, to tell people the dude is doing baseball signals? Right? That is not only a poor, not a solid team, that is your reputation that just hit the toilet because somebody didn't do their due diligence in advance. So you have to do, if you're bringing on a second shooter, I think you guys already know this. I don't want people like, Kawania, I already know. Don't go to Facebook. Don't check on Facebook because you need a second shooter at the last minute. And I don't care if anybody's here from Honeybook, but that's the same thing. I don't want to hear about new job on Honeybook and you're pulling out a second shooter and you don't know them. No, I'm pretty sure there's some pools out there of skilled shooters that you can pull from, and it shouldn't be a website. Nobody tell Natalie Frankie what I just said. All right. Right. You want to make sure your contracts are solid. Your contract is created to protect you, not the client, not somebody else. It should be solid. And every time something goes down with your job, with your business, you take it back to the attorney and you say, I need this contract updated to address this new issue. It should not be where you ask other people, have you guys gone through this? Do you have a clause for it? It blows my mind. We run a business and then we act like we're like buddy buddies online. I mean, you can be my buddy buddy, but I want a professional. And here are the people you need. You need an attorney. You need an insurance agent. Now I love Hiscox just as much as the next person, but you need somebody to advise you as far as insurance is concerned. All right? It's not a bad idea to talk to a security you can talk to a security person at a venue, but just to make sure you understand. If you're doing a destination wedding, you should be checking the State Department if you're in the US or whatever government offices. You can check crime reports in areas before you pick these cute, fun, new, hip places for engagement shoots. But there needs to be some homework done before you take this couple out there without any idea of what's going to go down. And I'm not saying that a neighborhood, you know, and one of anybody's like, Kawania said our neighborhood might be bad. I'm just saying do your homework, all right? All right, you know I had to mention them. This is every wedding planner's nightmare. I swear, and every time something went down, for any of you that don't know, so this is Brooklyn Beckham and Nicola Peltz, right? Nicola Peltz. And so they got married recently, right? Went through 3 wedding planners. Now, I personally was like, if I had gotten a call and you just got rid of 1 wedding planner and we're 6 weeks out or whatever it was, that's red flag number 1. But my biggest thing here is, who said it yesterday? I think Matthew said, do not take a job if you are not ready for it. You are doing yourself a disservice and you're doing the client a disservice. I don't know these people. I don't know the planners, but it screamed they were not ready for that job, okay? But on the flip side, have a solid contract in place. I can't say that enough. But let me hit something else while I'm talking about this. I happened to attend a conference not too long ago, and a freelance for one of the vendors was speaking on the stage, and she was spilling all the tea of what happened behind closed doors at that conference. And I was having heart palpitations because as long as you were taking care of a celebrity wedding, everybody, that includes every freelance person involved, should have signed an NDA or a confidentiality something. And so for her to be up there spilling all the tea, and people are like, oh, we're at a conference. I'm like, as long as there are things out there called the Shade Room and TMZ, you should have some clauses out there protecting you, okay? Because what happens here is we're thinking, oh, it's innocent, and somebody says, let me post this to my friends and tell them what happened at the celebrity's wedding. And then next thing somebody says, hey, Shade Room, did you see this? And now that celebrity is at risk because of a story that was told innocently, but it was told in a public setting. And now the next thing you know, your reputation is at risk because there was not a contract in place to prevent everybody from telling everything that happened behind closed doors. So when you work on certain weddings, and it's funny because I just said at a celebrity wedding, all your weddings, your freelancers should sign something basically saying they're not going to talk about what happened at your wedding. Not so much about how you did your job, but if you sign a confidentiality clause with your client, they should sign one with you. Okay. All right, the right business insurance. Let me just put it out there. I get no money from insurance companies, but I've been screaming insurance for a long time. When I get that $5 gift card they like to send you when your couples, the Starbucks gift card that they send you when your couples book the wedding insurance. Business property insurance, as I mentioned before, you want to make sure you have the right insurance to protect your property, protect your stuff. General liability insurance is almost a given, but there are so many little provisions in general liability insurance that you have to get other insurance. It's so basic. Professional liability insurance. So anybody who got up on this stage, like me, should have professional liability insurance. This is for all of us. Like, I put a disclaimer in there, like, I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not this, you know? But the bottom line is you should have something protecting you for the knowledge you share with other people. If you get on Instagram and share knowledge, you should have professional liability insurance, because somebody could come back and say, the advice you gave, you know, hurt my business or hurt my wedding, and I'd like to sue you for that. So you should have professional liability insurance. If you have an e-commerce shop, you want technology and internet liability. You may not have to have many clauses. You could probably get one that includes several of these things, but these are things you should keep in mind if you decide. So if you want to start one of those businesses, those education businesses that Renee mentioned yesterday, look into some technology or internet liability insurance. Workers' comp. So people are like, but everybody I have is an independent. Well, there needs to be something in place, and you better be sure that if you don't have it, that they have something, because if it comes back, you may end up owing them a bunch of money because, yeah, you probably were treating them like an employee and you should have had money set aside for workers' comp. identity theft protection. I don't want to get too deep into that. Life insurance, I mean, you know what it is. And I'm looking at my time. Life insurance you want to have, especially as a small business owner, because there should be something to help your family, if at least replace your salary, or at least help to hire somebody in your place so that your family is not devastated if something should happen to you. Health insurance, understood, disability insurance, and event planning insurance. We require all of our couples to get it. We require that all of our vendors that our couples hire have business insurance. That helps us get rid of all the Aunt Susies who like to bake cakes and all of that kind of stuff. But it also, because I don't want it to roll over to me as the event planner. A clear communication strategy. So I've mentioned it a lot. When I did plan the first event in '89, I was 22, 23 years old, and there were still a bunch of people looking to me about what should I do. And what I realized when everything went down is I needed to go to the venue first. I need to go to the bigwigs. I need to talk to my bosses. So if anything went down on site, you have to have a strategy in place on who do I talk to first, and then that chain of where it goes down. So before you can do that, you don't want to spend valuable time trying to figure out where everybody is and how to contact them. You should have everybody's names, their on-site contact information. This includes delivery drivers, okay? The emergency contact information for your stakeholders, and I showed an example in the worksheet of the information we collect, but I don't recommend paper. Google Forms are amazing for this kind of thing. Again, I want it for the delivery drivers, because, or tell me whom I should contact if something happens to your delivery driver, right? Okay, who to call for what, when, and that falls under all the things I mentioned before. And I mentioned that guest information guide. Like I said, I want people to know who to contact as far as guests are concerned if anything should happen, but I want it to be friendly. And here are some of our tools. We have an on-site contact information sheet for everybody. We save it on our phone. All of that information I collect, I not only share it with the venue, but like I told you, I give the little laminated cards to the photographers and videographers. I mentioned the day of contact, the communication flow or the phone tree. It's like something straight out of elementary school, right? When it was a snow day and you start with these people and you move to the next, that stuff still works. And you want to know because you want to make sure everybody got what they needed to know. One of our tools is radios or walkies, but if you don't have them, there are apps you can use that came out of a lot of the hurricanes over the last 10 years that you can turn your phone into a walkie-talkie. And we start a group chat before every wedding so that we can all get information out. And then we still have an old school message board in our vendor room. Sometimes they don't have cork boards, but we find a way. We put up a piece of foam core, and it's the old-fashioned way of keeping communication available just in case our regular tools stop working. Because I learned that in 2001. I want an analog way of communicating in case the digital way stops working. You want an emergency kit. So now, I'm sure everybody's like, I got an emergency kit. It's awesome. That's fine, but you want one that protects your company too. So, oops, did I go back too far? And so the one that protects your company is, your insurance information, your contact information, the names of your advisors. What is your attorney's name? Who do you call that day if you need to talk to somebody really fast and get legal advice? You should have your own emergency kit that protects you and your business for you. Specifically for you and your team to use, okay? And sorry, I just realized what I was doing. And I think I have a list of that on the website, and I'll make sure I share it with you. So I'm gonna hit two real quick case studies. Planner overboard. These are real things, by the way, and that was a picture of exactly where it occurred. 2015, we decided we're gonna do fun photo shoots in different places. And we did it on that dock. And we set up the table, and the photographer asked me if everything was okay, and I said, it's great. And she went to her car to get her camera, and I decided to walk around the table to see if everything was as it was. And I hit a plank that wasn't secure. And off the side I went. Now, that would have been fine, but I had to be dramatic, and my leg got stuck in the nautical rope, and I was hanging upside down. I think there's still the rope burn on my leg from when it happened. Now, in this moment, I realized that I may be a crisis management expert, but I didn't teach my team crap, because they burst into tears and ran away and left me hanging upside down off the side. This is when I realized I really should have gone to those jazzercise classes, because here I was trying to get myself up out of the water. And I finally got up. Well, no, one of them came back, and I had to convince her to get my leg out of the rope, and she did. And in the water I went. I grew up in Atlantic City, so swimming with the tide, fortunately it was me. I knew how to swim with the tide, and I could get back. Meanwhile, I had on a sweatshirt and jeans. That was not an easy thing to swim in. As I'm coming up the ladder, I realized my car keys were in the front pocket of my hoodie, and my brand new Apple phone that I didn't get care for was in my back pocket. So that's fine, got up. This is where I learned that event planners don't have enough insurance to cover everything. They covered to a point, but they explained to me at that point I should have insurance that covers my supplies when I'm at a photo shoot or when I'm at a wedding. All right, needless to say, that photo shoot we were planning on the roof did not happen. So ensure you're working in a safe environment. Ensure you have insurance coverage for your team and your property, because I was so grateful that it was me and not one of my team members. Ensure your team is trained in what to do in a crisis, and ensure you have backup equipment. Number 2, stolen wedding cake. Picture this, 2009, Washington, D.C. hotel. I remember this because we just got iPhones or something, so now we're doing selfies, right? This is when Charm City Cakes was very popular. Charm City Cakes was Duff, based in Baltimore. They were like many celebrities. They had provided the wedding cake for our couple, and it was, and I'm mentioning this because there's a point to this story. The groom had just won the Super Bowl or something that year. And so the groom proposed to the bride over a cranium game. It was the ugliest wedding cake I'd ever seen. It was the shape of a brain. Okay, so we were all geeked out because it was Duff. We were banquet staff, everybody was geeked out because they were there, right? We took photos, blah, blah, blah. Fast forward to the wedding, they cut the cake, they roll the cake into the back, and you know, as a planner, you know how long things take. So it hit me, the cake hadn't been served yet. So let me head into the kitchen. Hey guys, where's the cake? And they're all standing around, and they're like, Kawania, we don't know what happened to the cake. Somebody stole a wedding cake? And my rule with my team, if something goes down, you got 30 seconds to freak out, and then we got to get it together. I used that 30 seconds to curse out every single person in that kitchen in that moment, because I kept thinking, who lost a wedding cake? It's a cake, for God's sakes. So I mentioned it's a celebrity. My husband, Chris Wooten, only shows up to help me with weddings when there's a football player involved. And he happened to be there that day. I need a cake, and guess what hotels don't have at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night? Enough wedding cake to serve guests. So my DC colleagues are gonna be like, I know what hotel it is. There was a Costco, you had to cross a bridge, and there was a Costco in Arlington. And I called the Costco Do you guys have any sheet cake? Yes. Okay, this was the #1 line I heard all night. Somebody stole the wedding cake. But I said, somebody stole the wedding cake. I need sheet cake. Sure, we'll take it out, we'll get it, we'll pre-cut it. Great. Chris Wooten goes to get it. It probably only took him 20 minutes. Felt like 2 hours. This is part of the strong team. I go to the DJ. I need you to keep this music hot and pumping because the old ladies are gonna come to me in a minute and wanna know where the wedding cake is. Right? And so the DJ, same response. Somebody stole the wedding cake? But music is pumping, everybody's happy, they're dancing, nobody notices. Kay comes back, we sex it up, whipped cream, because we gotta make it, we need you to not notice that it's not the same cake. So everybody's eating this cake. Here's a line I heard all night. This is the best wedding cake It probably cost us $60, right? But that is the value of a solid team. You know, everybody was involved that day to help us fix that challenge. Here's what we learned. Relationships are everything. Make sure you're working with your vendor partners as a team. They were all involved. Nobody fell apart, not even the people in the kitchen. Ensure you have a day of contact info for your vendors. I did not have a phone number for the baker that day. I couldn't call somebody and say, what can we do? It wouldn't have helped. They were in Baltimore, I was in DC. Encourage your couples to consider event insurance. And this couple did have it and have a runner. I had a runner. So what happened is we called the cops later at night and it was all they could do not to laugh in our faces. But we needed to file a police report because the cake was pretty expensive, right? We filed a police report. We submitted it for insurance. When the couple came back, that's when we told them that they did not eat their wedding cake. Later that night, the hotel's risk manager showed up because the one thing I didn't think of, there were cameras in the kitchen. It was an inside job. It was a contractor, and they thought it was cool to take the cake home and show their friends. Needless to say, the hotel's not the same hotel now. They literally asked me to stop telling this story. Like, yeah. Right. So guys, that is my life in a nutshell in business. This QR code does take you to the slides, but also some of the handouts that I referenced as far as the checklists are concerned. So thank you so much.